Hello and welcome to the AFP webinar, Nudges to Improve Legacy Marketing. Thank you for joining us. My name is Gary and I'll be the operator for today's presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acquaint you with a few features of this web event technology. At any time during today's program, you may adjust your audio using any computer volume settings that you may have. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see the Q&A window. There's a large window that holds all of your sent messages and a smaller text box at the bottom where you will type in your questions. To send a question, click on the text box and type your text. When finished, click the send button. All questions that you submit are only seen by today's presenter. Your questions will be responded to in the order in which they were received and will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Any handouts associated with today's webinar can be found in the handout pod on your screen and also under the Resources tab on the event page where you first registered. Now I would like to introduce today's speaker, Ligia Pina. Ligia is president of Globetrotting Fundraiser, where she specializes in helping nonprofits with their fundraising and legacy strategy. She's also a PhD candidate at the University of Kent, researching national legacy marketing campaigns as a tool to change society's behavior towards gifts in wills. As an AFP master trainer, she's trained countless fundraisers around the globe. She's a sought-after and seasoned international presenter who enjoys sharing her knowledge and empowering nonprofit professionals to think about legacies differently by daring to be creative and innovative. At this time, I'll turn things over to you, Ligia, to get us started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's AFP webinar. I'm very happy to be back again to talk about nudges that improve legacy marketing. So you already have my bio. Here's my contact information if you do want to get in touch with me. And if you're the kind that, like I am, when I listen to webinars or participate at conferences, I love to tweet nuggets of wisdom. So if there is any nugget of wisdom that makes you go, aha, and you want to tweet it out or even Instagram it, here are my details. So you can always find me at GlobetrottingFR on Twitter or Globetrotting Fundraiser on Instagram. So this is building on a presentation that I did last year for AFP. And so I'm not going to go back to the fundamentals of what is decision science, et cetera. But I will talk a little bit give you a little bit of the background information because I want us to really focus on all of those heuristics that you can be leveraging in your legacy marketing in order to really, really inspire and get your donors excited about gifts and wills. So when I talk about heuristics, what does that mean? Well, so what it means particularly is basically our mind always wants to find shortcuts in order to make decisions because, and this, I'm going to explain a little bit more of where this comes from. This comes from a psychologist, a very well-known psychologist called Daniel Kahneman. He and his research partner found that, we make over 50,000 decisions every day, okay? But we don't really realize that we do that because a lot of them have become very instinctive, very reactive. I'll give you an example. This morning, my alarm rang at 6 o'clock, and I chose to not get up and to snooze for another 9 minutes. And then I snoozed a second time, and then I ended up staying in bed for an extra hour. Right there, I took several decisions, and those decisions were not thought out. They were just very instinctive because I'm tired, my head hurts, and I just wanted to stay in bed because my bed was really, really comfortable. So imagine, these are all like those little decisions that we make on a daily basis. And sometimes some decisions are bigger than just deciding whether you're going to snooze in the morning and stay in bed or get up, right? And so in order to make a lot of sometimes decisions, we take shortcuts. And so because it reduces our mental effort. And so those shortcuts are those things that can help us make decisions and move forward. And so heuristics are exactly that. They are little biases that we use to help us make decisions. Now, interestingly, shortcuts have been mapped out, and they're those cognitive biases. And there's this is a codex. This is really interesting, and you can download this from designhacks.co, and it's really, really interesting. We're obviously not going to go over all of this. In this codex, in this design, there's 188 cognitive biases, but actually it's been reported that there's over 230. And so these are all of these little shortcuts that we take, and they're different, right? They're different based on the different situation. And the moment you start reading into this, you start realizing how you make decisions. You start analyzing what are the things that work for you depending on the situation. So using this cognitive bias, and building on the presentation from last year, I'm going to review some of the biases that I mentioned last year and build on some additional ones that I see we could be leveraging in order to help our donors move through the decision of considering a gift in the will and then actually going through with it. But I'm also going to identify some that can really hinder our marketing, our legacy marketing. Okay. So this all comes from, I was mentioning Daniel Kahneman. There's also another great book by Richard Thaler and Kassenstein, Nudge, which is also really, really great. And all of these are all those elements, right? And a lot of this presentation leverages everything I've read from these books. Robert Cialdini's Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, is also a really great read as well. So this entire presentation is built on everything that I've read through these books. Two other fantastic reads that you should seriously have in your bookshelf is Frankie Ambrogetti's book Emotion Raising, and actually he's working on a subsequent book that should be coming out in the next few months. And of course, Dr. Russell James' book, which is not about cognitive biases, etc. But this is an actual must if you want to be able to design impactful legacy marketing for your donors. And so this is not all the science, but a lot of the foundational. Hang on, there's a bit of background noise that I hear, and it's quite distracting. Is it possible to mute? Thank you.
Just did it.
Okay, thank you so much. It's kind of weird to hear your voice back at you. It's kind of strange to present that way. So although these are not, these are great books that you should have in your bookshelf, of course it doesn't include absolutely everything that you could and should be reading. So, but these are 5 great foundational books that can really, really help you along. All right, let's go. Let's continue. So what do we need in order to make that yummy legacy pizza? And as I was putting this together, I thought, well, what are the different ingredients that you want? And as with any pizza, I bet you're all thinking, okay, it's 1 o'clock. If you haven't had lunch, you probably want to have pizza now. Your legacy marketing and what I'm about to go over is really about picking and choosing the right ingredient based on who is your target audience, who will you be speaking to, what is the message in particular that you're trying to convey. And so what I'm about to present to you is not about putting absolutely everything at once, but it's about determining and analyzing what are the different nudges that you could be using at different points in time and at different communication and engagement opportunities with your donors. So you can have your pizza in a million different ways. It's up to you to determine what is used at what point in time. So the first one, which is called effect, and this is something that has been used a lot in fundraising in general. But with legacies, it hasn't been leveraged an awful lot. And basically, it's that shortcut that uses an emotion, and usually through an image, to influence a decision. And so oftentimes, and we've seen this, right? In fundraising, we use emotion, a picture, an image, to convey an emotion. And in legacy marketing, it's used as well, but having audited a lot of legacy marketing. It's often not used as well, meaning that oftentimes there's still a lot of organizations that when they're trying to talk about legacy fundraising, they always use the typical picture of the older gray-haired couple, as opposed to trying to convey what can be done through an image, what can be done in the future with a legacy gift. So here's a great example that I used to work at Greenpeace International, and my colleagues at Greenpeace UK did use this image as part of a legacy marketing campaign that they did. And so these are all buttons and stickers and pins and et cetera of all the different campaigns that were done and that were basically marked the history of Greenpeace UK for the baby boomer generation. So a lot of these campaigns were campaigns from way back when. And so this was something about applying both the effect nudge to convey a bit of like that nostalgia, but also leverage the, what the research that Dr. Russell James has done, which is about the autobiographical memory of helping donors think back about what their life has been through the organization. So this was incredibly successful and very, very powerful as a way of leveraging that effect, that emotion with donors, okay? Another nudge, which is very important, is one of the big things that we want to be doing with our legacy donors is to remove the tension. You need to ensure that any doubt, any uncertainty or ambiguity is removed, right? And so leveraging uncertainty and ambiguity is really important. So that's the mental shortcut where you basically override the desired action. So whether there's missing information or the information is incomplete. So this is the example that I'm sharing here with you is an example of how this could have been leveraged in this case. And this is a small excerpt of an appeal that was done as a prospecting appeal. And so if we were to read just the beginning where it says, now I want you to ask you whether you'll consider making another choice, the choice that many of us in these countries, we don't need to make the choice to shape the future by making a will. So here's the big thing. The second paragraph, it says, I'm one of those people who used to think that I had no need for a will. My affairs were straightforward, and I'm certainly not one to be super wealthy. So surely I can leave it to the law to sort things out, right? So this was a missed opportunity in this case, whereby in what they did is they created additional uncertainty and ambiguity by phrasing the sentence in that way. Now, this text is not necessarily incorrect. It's not wrong, and it is definitely an approach. But if we wanted to leverage a nudge, and we wanted to nudge donors in the right direction, you don't want to be nudging them towards by reinforcing the misconception. You want to change that, right? It's all about removing the ambiguity in here. And so what could have been done is change the narrative from away from reinforcing the norm and changing it to say, well, we can. It's easy to write your will, and here's how you can do it. So you make it more proactive as opposed to reinforcing what you don't want them to do, right? Does that make sense? Are there any questions so far? Can you tell me if there's any questions coming in? Because I really want people to ask them as we go along, and I'll happily stop every few slides to check in to see if any questions are coming in.
Yeah, there are none at this time.
Okay. All right. So I probably should have said that from the beginning. If you do have questions along the way, please pop them into the questions, and I'll make sure to answer. I'll make sure to answer them as we go along so that you don't forget your question by the time we get to the end. All right. The third one, anchoring, and this has been used quite a lot and it's starting to get used more and more. It's used quite a lot in just general fundraising. But here's a great example from Sick Kids Hospital Foundation. So Sick Kids Hospital is in Toronto and here in Canada. And so the anchoring is that piece of information where people will rely more heavily on that first piece of information as the anchor in order to help them make the decision. So for instance, in this example, the anchor here is the 1%. So their eyes will focus on the 1% because that's an easy piece of information. And so here where it says even a gift in your will of 1% of your estate can make a difference. And so what that will do is will normalize the concept that even if I leave just 1% of my estate, that's good, right? So that's a good way of using that, the anchoring nudge, the anchoring heuristics here in this case. So it's a great way to nudge donors to basically normalize the concept that you don't have to be wealthy. You don't have to leave a lot of money in your will, even just 1%. And 1% seems like such a small amount, but can represent quite a significant gift when you consider the totality of the person's estate, right? So this is a great way. And I mean, the anchor doesn't need to be a statistic here. It can be another piece of information that helps, again, remove that tension that might prevent donors from considering a gift in their will. All right, next, the confirmation bias. And this is, this I like. So basically this heuristics, it describes the underlying tendency to notice or focus on a piece of information that gives us more credence or evidence that fits our own beliefs. So basically, we always look at others who have the same belief system as ourselves as a way to confirm that our belief is correct, right? So in this case, which is a great example from the RSPCA New South Wales in Australia, is saying, the love you feel for your pet is like no other. Who else can bring you the same companionship and sense of meaning above and beyond yourself? Who else will sit with you through thick and thin and love you no matter what? And so that's your pet, right? And so in this case, they leverage this notion that we know that only our pets can love us the way, who will always be there no matter what, because pets have unconditional love. And so that's how they use that heuristics in order to confirm that the RSPC gets that. And we're there to make sure that can be done. And it's really interesting because when it comes to animal rights organizations or animal shelters, etc. These are people who donate to those kinds of causes are incredibly very vocal about their support for protecting animal rights. And so they knew how to leverage that very well because they know that other people like themselves will look for that confirmation. So this is a great example of confirmation bias as a way to demonstrate that other people are also believe in that kind of belief system. Social proof, and this is something that we use a lot, and actually, people like Dr. Adrian Sargent and Jen Shen have written extensively about the use of social proof, and it's used a lot in general fundraising. And so another way to use it is for legacies, obviously. And so the concept of social proof, which most of you might already recognize and know, is where we tend to copy or mirror the actions of others in order to proceed on a specific behavior. So we always look at people who are like ourselves, excuse me, as an indication whether something is normal. Because we, at the end of the day, we never want to be outcasted and be different than anybody else. So we always look at our peers to see what that behavior is like. So for instance, here, the example from Charity Water is the tributary is a community of givers who are making clean water part of their lasting legacy. And so see here it says is that if you leave essentially what they're saying is by leaving a gift in your will, you become a tributary and you're part of this community of givers. This is what we believe in. And so it enables you to know, well, if I leave a gift in my will, then I'll be part of that community as well. And that community looks like me, is like me, thinks like me, believes like me. And therefore that is normal. That's that social proof that confirms that my thought process of wanting to do this is also normalized. It's great. It's other people like me do this. And so this is a great use of how that can be leveraged for legacy marketing. And of course, here it's used for their legacy society, but it could be used, if you're trying to normalize the act of writing a will. It can also be used to normalize just the concept of legacies in your organizations by saying things like, 60% or the majority of donors at organization ABC leave a gift in their will, which, helps support programs, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. So those are great ways. This is probably one of the easiest and simplest nudge that you can use in your legacy marketing. And it should be used because it works. It actually works. You could also use it in your own surveys, for instance, if you do a legacy survey, saying, 15% of Americans leave a gift in their will to a charity that they care about. And so that helps normalize that whole concept of gifts and wills. All right, any questions that come in? I'm going to take a sip of water and just to check in to see if there's any questions that have come in.
Yes, we do have a couple. One person is wondering if you're going to be talking about how to find the best people to attract for legacy giving, for example, those who have given X amount of years and how to approach them, phone, letter, brochure.
Okay, so I'm going to take note of that. I'm going to take note of that and address that question at the end because I want to make sure that we get through the actual topic of this webinar, which is on marketing, but identifying prospects is definitely something I can answer if we have time at the end.
Okay, and another question. Did you have more to say on that?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay, another question. So social proof could be having someone who is leaving a legacy to your organization. Talk about why and how they did it. Or talk about why and how they did it. I guess it's a question there.
Yeah, exactly. So using that as like a testimonial is definitely also a social proof because it basically demonstrates to a donor that might, how can I put it, a donor that can identify to that story, for instance, if it's a female donor of a certain age group, then you know that any other donor that is considering leaving a gift in their will to your organization that fits that same sort of demographic, et cetera, then that's going to act as a social proof as well. So social proof doesn't necessarily need to mean large quantities of people. It can also be something very specific, like a specific demographic, for instance. I'm going to add in something that is outside of what social proof heuristics is, but it's also really, really important in your legacy marketing that you make sure that you don't just tell the story of donors who have left a gift in their will and has passed away. Your living pledgers is also very important to communicate and to share those stories, because don't forget that, again, leveraging that social proof is you're talking to people who are still living. So if all they hear is stories of people who have passed away, well, they're not going to really, basically see themselves in them, right? And so think about that when you're looking at your legacy marketing, whether it's online or offline or any communication that you send out. that you tell the story of donors who have passed, but you focus more on the story of those who are currently still living and notifying you of their gift in the will. So that's equally important. Okay, so here, perceived effort is another heuristic that's really, really important. And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the need to remove that tension, right? Anything that might prevent donors from moving forward. So perceived effort is a mental shortcut that means that people make decisions based on the perception of effort rather than the actual effort that it'll take. So if something feels, and think about your own behavior, right? If something feels complex, difficult, requiring more energy, we'll procrastinate. We'll leave it off, right? That's why we have that expression: what you resist persists. Well, we all do that. I mean, I do that as well. Sometimes I'll procrastinate on something because it feels very heavy and requires a lot of effort. And then when I do finally get around to it, there's always that facepalm moment where I go, well, that wasn't so bad. Why didn't I do that, right? So here's an example of a use of perceived effort, although it could have been done even more. Like we could have driven that home a lot more. So this is an excerpt of an appeal as well that was done by my former colleague at Greenpeace Australia Pacific. And so this is a portion of that appeal that was sent out. So it says, supporters are concerned about the effort that might be needed to write a new will or update their current one with a codicil. But Harry is one of our Green Guardian that says, adding a codicil in my will or rewriting my will is a very easy step to take, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So, right, so here in this case, they use social proof to demonstrate that, Harry over here found it very easy. But did they really, really address the issue? They only said it was easy, but it didn't actually say, and like the rest of the letter doesn't actually address the issue, by the way. So it acknowledged the effort, but it didn't address the effort, right? So a great way in which this could have been thoroughly addressed, which would have brought even more credence to Harry's testimonial here, is they could have just said, if you need to write a new will, here's the step. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. Step 3, do that. Or if you wish to write a codicil, here's the step 1, 2, boom, boom, end of story. And that idea, this is the idea of basically chunk it in pieces that are manageable, right? Because you can address the perception of the effort, but you need to also give them something that will really allow them to say, oh, okay, well, if all I do is step 1 for now, then that at least I'm moving closer towards the goal, right? The same way that when you plan out your project, sometimes you look at a project and it seems absolutely colossal. But the moment you start breaking it down into small bite-sized morsels, you're like, okay, I can totally do this, right? You want to do that. You want to give your donor that ability to go, okay, well, I can do this, and then I can do that, and then I can do that. And then at the end of the day, they've rewritten their will or they got a codicil, and boom, you're there. So it really comes down to, again, removing that tension, making it easy for the donor to go, oh, okay, that's no problem. I need to call a new legal professional. Great, okay, here's a link. Give them a link. Make it easy so that they don't have to think through all of those steps, right? So that's how you facilitate that, and that's how you are of service to your donors. And donors will remember that when they see that you are of service to them. Okay? Hope that makes sense. I love the perceived effort is one of the heuristics that I would love to see more charities get on board with that, because I think that is, in my opinion, one of the biggest obstacles why so many donors are not leaving a gift in their will. Not only because they're not asked and we don't communicate properly, but because we don't make it easier for them to think through of like how it's done and how simple it can be. Because when you think about it, it really is quite simple. But what you don't know what you don't know until someone tells you that it's a certain way, right? And so that's how we can help our donors. Messenger. So this is another section of that same appeal, is basically the voice of that person that delivers the message affects the way we respond to it. Now, one of the big questions I'm often asked by fundraising professionals is who should sign the appeal, who should sign the thank you card, who should be the signatory for all kinds of different things. And not to give like the same typical social science type of answer is it depends, but it really, really is. And you have to think through, you have to be strategic about who is the best messenger. So in this case, my colleague at Greenpeace Australia Pacific used David Attenborough, who, for those of you who are probably environmental, is UK's foremost environmentalist. It's and he is a force to be reckoned with, right? And he was and he's also been a supporter of Greenpeace. So he was the best person to be kind of that signatory, that person that can bring that message to donors, right? And so you have to think strategically of who is the person that is best to deliver the message. Now, when I say messenger, it doesn't have to be a celebrity. It doesn't have to be the board chair. It doesn't have to be the CEO. It has to be someone of credible based on the message that you're conveying. So, for instance, depending on the kind of appeal, it might be a program, a person from your programs team that is working on a particular program, if that's the appeal that you're sending. It could be a volunteer that's delivering a certain service for your beneficiaries. It depends, but it has to be someone that brings that level of credibility to the specific message. In my experience, usually the CEO is not the best messenger. Okay, not to say that they're not, but depending on the specific message that you're trying to convey, the CEO or the board chair, or even you as the fundraiser, probably not the best messenger. So it's about finding that right person. Loss aversion. Oh, this one is one I really, really like a lot as well. And you probably have experienced this while shopping. You probably experience it today if you never know, is that we're more motivated by what we stand to lose than by what we stand to gain. So have you ever gone, I'm sure you've all gone online shopping at one point, and you're looking at those shoes, and then suddenly a little pop-up comes up and says, oh, Susie in whatever town has bought this precise pair of shoes, and there's only 3 left now, right? And then you're suddenly like, oh my gosh, if I don't put that in my shopping cart right away, I will not be able to have that pair of shoes. Well, that's what it is. You're motivated by what you stand to lose because you want to have that. So we're not using that an awful lot. And so this is an example of also another appeal that was sent out. And this is where the text that was written, the copy that was written, perfectly fine. No, nothing wrong with it. It is fine as it is. If we wanted to use the loss aversion nudge in here, it could have been, the copy could have read something like, instead of saying, sadly, we don't always get the chance to thank people who remember us in their will. So what if we were to flip the narrative a little bit and say, don't miss your chance to notify us of your gift and your will. By doing so, you won't miss the chance to take part in the activities specifically designed for our Legacy Society members who will get, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it's just a very, simple and switch in the narrative in order to make it feel like you don't want to lose your opportunity to be part of these activities by not notifying us. So this is another way to really kind of light a match under people's seats in order for them to, for instance, in this case, to notify you of their gift in their will to your charity. So that's a good way to motivate donors to really notify, letting you know, because that's oftentimes, the biggest challenge is that we move people through a pipeline and we try to, we inspire them as much as we can to pledge their gift, but then oftentimes they don't tell us, right, that they've left a gift in the will. So this is a good way this is a great nudge for loss aversion of using that in other ways as well to get donors to notify you of their intent to leave a gift in their will. Has any other questions come in since the last time we stopped?
Yes, we do have one. Are these nudges that you spoke of suggested for print, social media, et cetera?
For anything, whether you're online, offline, they can be used as long as you're talking to someone. They can be used in anything. I mean, the private sector, the commercial sector has been using these forever, right? Most of the time, we don't even realize they're doing it. But we're a little bit slower in the nonprofit sector at jumping on this bandwagon. So, yes, absolutely, you can use it on your social media, your digital, your print, everything. Absolutely. Like as long as you're talking to donors, you should be, looking at the right way to use them. Depending on, it always comes down to what is it that you're trying to do, what is your call to action, and which nudge is appropriate at what point in time. Okay, so like I said at the beginning, it's not about throwing all of the ingredients on top of the pizza and hoping that something comes out. It's about being very strategic about which ones complement what at one point, right? A pizza with everything is just a big icky thing. You have to have, everything has to blend together properly. I think I'm going to call pizza for dinner tonight. All right, the bandwagon effect is, and I'm sure we've experienced that. That's also something we experience a lot in, when you're in high school is that, the rate of uptake or the belief is increased when they've already been adopted by others. And so I really like this example. And it's really interesting is that many of these examples were not exactly examples that I think, I could be wrong in some cases, but that were done on purpose. It was just sometimes we do something and then someone analyzes it and goes, oh, look, they used this heuristics, or, they did this, which basically, they put a framework behind what was done. So this is a great example of, for instance, here in this example, this is an old campaign from Remember Charity a few years back. And so here they used the Be a Legend campaign. Was basically like they had a couple of their donors that, no, let me rephrase that. If memory serves me right, it was a couple of board members who had agreed to leave a gift in their will to WaterAid, which is a UK-based charity. And they decided to do a parachute jump. And so then a couple of donors got on the bandwagon and were like, oh, well, I also want to leave a gift. I also left a gift in my will to WaterAid, and I'll do that as well. And so then they turned it into a campaign, and that was used part of Remember Charity Week. It was really, really interesting and really a great way to say, like, other donors will jump on board if they see that other people are doing. So it's a combination of, it almost feels like it's a combination of different nudges, right? So that's why we oftentimes, when we do, for instance, Legacy Society dinners or something like that, we often say, well, is there someone that you would like to bring along that you think would be interested in considering a gift in their will, right? So that bandwagon concept of other people's, the rate of uptake or trends will increase when when people see that it's been adopted by others. We have to be careful, though, because not all nudges are necessarily going to give you what you're looking for. So there are some caveats here that we need to be mindful of. So the halo effect, so nudges that do hurt your legacy marketing. And I kind of touched on this a little bit at the beginning of the session. And that is that the halo effect is that a positive impression of people, brands, and products in one area positively influences our feelings in another area. So for instance, this is an example, and I took this from a legacy marketing brochure that is in development right now with one of my clients, and this was done prior to them hiring me. And so here in this concept is that the halo effect of like, like if someone else is doing it that looks like me, then I'm going to do it, and that should positively impact us, right? And so for me, the way I saw this is that this is an organization that is an emergency shelter for women escaping abuse, etc. And all the pictures that they had in their brochure were all old white people. And so notwithstanding the entire conversation about diversity and inclusivity and et cetera, but also having communication that it represents our audience, represents our beneficiaries, and so on. And so that halo effect here could project that message negatively, that the only people that would leave a gift in their will would be old, white, middle-class people, which is not representative of the area of work that the organization is working in. And so we need to be mindful of that, and because it can hurt our legacy marketing, because it's basically saying if you don't look or feel like this, then that this doesn't apply to you. And this happens a lot in legacy marketing. So we need to be very careful of this. Another element, another nudge that can help is the curse of knowledge. And so that's the concept of when better informed people find it extremely difficult to think about problems from the perspective of a lesser informed person. So in this case is an example from one of my alma maters. And it basically, when you read this is an old advert that was in the university magazine. I don't know, it dates from quite a while back, so I'm sure it's been updated since then. But here in this case, it just makes the assumption that the people who are reading this, so the alumni, know exactly what is being talked about. If you read the copy here, my grandfather always maintained that the real wealth of any country can be measured by its investment in education. Planned giving is a lasting way to contribute to education as long as Concordia lives. My planned gift will continue to grow. It's basically assuming that the alumni that's reading this knows exactly what this guy is talking about, who is basically a professor at the business school. Your gift, your legacy, your plan. A planned gift can help fulfill your financial, philanthropic, and estate planning goals. Did it say what it is? No, it's making an assumption that anybody will know what a planned gift is, what legacies is. And, well, I mean, I could go on and on and on about this, but it really basically what that does is it creates that wall, that it creates tension because, again, no one likes to feel dumb. No one likes to feel like they're excluded from the conversation just because they don't understand what the messenger is talking about. And so you need to be careful not to do that. And this again goes back also to some of the research that Russell James has done on the language. He did a specific study in the US on titles that are used for legacy fundraisers. And even my use of legacies is not correct, actually. And basically the research demonstrated that donors don't know what planned giving means. They don't know what you're talking about. They're not really quite sure what legacy means, although they get it a little bit more than planned giving. But really, and I'll definitely do not talk about bequest because that's legal language, but they do understand donation in a will, gift in a will, that they understand. So why aren't we calling it what it is, right? And so that's what we want to avoid because it's one of our blind spots. So some final thoughts and tips. So some of the ingredients that you want to, oh gosh, why is it coming up this way? Some of the ingredients for your legacy marketing pizza, which I hope will be delicious. So the ones that so these are like simple questions you can ask yourself when trying to sprinkle those nudges a little bit everywhere when appropriate. So for effect, am I emotionally stirred? For uncertainty and ambiguity, do I have all the information I need to take the next step? So that's what you want the donor to feel, right? Anchoring, what information is used to help make a decision? Confirmation bias, does this information favors my existing beliefs, right? If it reaffirms the wrong belief, then you need to probably review the copy to make sure that you're enforcing the right belief. Social proof, who else like me is taking the action? Perceived effort, how hard or how easy does this feel? If it feels hard, then you want to review what you put together. If it feels easy, then great, you're on the right track. Messenger is the person asking of significant authority to move me to action. So will that person really bring that credibility and that inspirational message that you want to convey? Loss aversion, what do I stand to lose by not taking action? If I don't do this next step that they're asking me to do, how will I lose out? The bandwagon effect, do I want to go along with everyone else, so does that help me move along? And the ones that you want to be careful of is that halo effect. Is this reflecting individual preferences, prejudices, ideology, or social perceptions? So you want to be mindful of that, especially now. This is a very hot topic at the moment, and we need to start integrating this in absolutely everything from now on, not just in legacies, and absolutely everything. And the curse of knowledge, are we communicating in a way that donors understand? Are we helping them understand all of this stuff? So we have to remember that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, okay? This is not like asking for a digital donation where you ask, you wait, the answer, boom, you're done. So first and foremost, this is perhaps the number one recommendation I tell anybody that works in legacies is do your own estate plan first, because how can you know what your donors are thinking and what is their thought process if you haven't done it yourself, right? Offer something of valuable. A will writing workbook is a simple thing that can really help your donors, right? If you're looking for an example of a will writing workbook, I have a template of that on my website. If you go to globetrottingfundraiser.com, there's a resource page and you'll find a sample will writing workbook that you can use and then modify and adapt based on your own legal system wherever you are. So you want to make sure that that gets verified by a legal professional in your jurisdiction. You want to listen to the clues for the right moment, so donors will tell you when's the right time to engage in that legacy conversation, but you can nudge them along as well, you know, whether you send them a survey or, you know, in all kinds of ways. You want to look at all the ways in which you communicate with your donors and try to look for those clues. And you want to encourage your donors to invite family members. So if you are having face-to-face meetings with donors, well, I mean, obviously not right now, but even if you are having conversations with your donors about their gifts and wills, virtual or on the phone, you want to invite them to talk with their family members, or even organize like a group call with their family members so that their family members know that what the donor's intentions are. And then you do want to invite donors to confirm their gift. A gift announcement form or a gift pledge form is also a great way to get your donors to notify you of their gift in their will to your organization. And that can be done either through a pledge form or it can be done over the phone. You will know what's the best way to do this with your donors. And lastly, what you want to make sure that just do remember that your donors, they're not one of your donors. You're one of their charities, and it's really important to remember this. And this was a quote by Mark Phillips at Blue Frog in the UK. It was one of those quotes that made me go, aha. I had one of those aha moments because we tend to always think, oh, our donor is this, our donor is that, but they're not your donors. You're just one of their charities, and you need to remember that they're probably having similar conversations with other charities, and so you need to be mindful of that in your approach. So we have 1 minute to spare, but I'm happy to stay on to continue answering questions. But if you do want to get in touch with me after the fact, if you have additional questions, this is my contact information. If you received the handout with my slide deck, all of these links to my Twitter and Instagram and etc. are all they're all hyperlinked, so you can get in touch with me. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the questions. And let's see, I hope I can do this. Stop sharing. All right, now I see. So I wanted to address the first question that I had pinned for later. So the identifying prospects. So, and I see here it was Susan that asked that question earlier. So yes, there's different ways of identifying them. So depending on the kind of organization that you're in, so whether you're a large organization, small, medium-sized, and how developed your fundraising program is. When I was at a small shop, the way that I identified, we didn't have a lot of infrastructure, so it was really difficult, and didn't have a big budget either. So it was really difficult to do these kinds of prospecting type of surveys and so on. So the way I built a list of a prospect list was I would call every single donor to thank them of their gift to the charity. And so if I found them at home in the afternoon and they had time to talk with me, then I would put them as prospects. But a great way to do this is by sending a prospecting survey. And that usually yields a lot of great responses. Because you can build a survey, very short one, maybe about 10 or 12 questions, and you can build it in a way that will eventually get to that $1 million questions where they would identify where they are in their stage. So whether they want to find out more information about how to leave a gift in their will, are they considering gift, are they intending to, or if they've already put your organization in their will. And so that's a great way to identify them. Now, in order of knowing, what age, et cetera, you want to look at donors that are over the age of 50 and who have given. So I love to look more at donors who have been perhaps given smaller amounts but consistently and consecutively. So if they've been, first and foremost, your monthly donors are your best prospects. So if you have a robust monthly giving program, then that just, working with those donors will keep you quite busy. Then you also want to look at donors who give on an annual basis, but have been doing that, consistently year after year for a long time. So that's your next level. Then your third level would be your your mid-level donors. Because oftentimes, if you have a mid-level giving program, oftentimes mid-level donors may not have the capacity to move up to major gift, but they definitely have the capacity to consider gift in their will. So that's why when you start looking at your legacy program, it's so important to have a very robust donor acquisition, conversion, and upgrade program, because that's where your profits will come from. they will not necessarily come from your major gift program. So we have to stop that thinking that your best legacy prospects are your major gift prospects, because it's not entirely true. It's not to say that you're not going to have legacy donors out of your major gift pool of donors, but it's not necessarily your best prospects. Okay, let me see. Trying to see all the other questions. Are there nudges suggested for print social? Got that. Are print legacy brochures and mailings to prospective legacy donors still effective? Absolutely, absolutely. But you need to know, Janet, that you always need to be in that position where you're having that conversation with your donors to really gauge what is the best way, what is their preferred way to receive communications from you. So if they continue to say, I want print, then you need to continue communicating with them through print. Does this mean that you don't communicate with them through legacies? No, through digital means? No, absolutely not. But if their number one preference is still print, then yes, absolutely continue with print. Susan asked, shouldn't the marketing image be what they're supporting and not an image of an old person? Absolutely. Absolutely. The image, the selection of the image needs to be entirely relevant to the copy that is accompanying it. Not just, we put this old white couple or whatever, an old picture of a donor just cause. There needs to have context around it because one supports the other. And don't forget that we're at that point where we just skim through stuff. So we don't necessarily read content, right? So if the picture used can tell half of the story, if not all of the story, then you're golden, right? So you really need to take the time to select the right images. Janet asked, what was the site of the sample will writing workbook? My website, globetrottingfundraiser.com. And then you just go at the top right-hand corner, there's going to be the menu, and you go to resources. So that's where you can get the sample will writing workbook. Deidre asks, what is the first thing you do if a donor says, I would like to include you in my will? What are small organizations with no legacy program in place yet? Oh, God, I love your question because, by the way, although I worked 4.5 years at Greenpeace International, working in 14 different markets, prior to that, I was always a small shop fundraiser. So, Deidre, I totally know what you're going through. So if a donor calls you to say, I want to include a gift in your will, so first and foremost, I want to get to know that donor so well. I want to find out everything about them. And then I would want to ask them where they are in that process. Is it because they're considering their gift, or are they at that stage where they're about to go see their legal advisor? If they say that they're about to go to their legal advisor, then you want to provide them with sample will language, meaning what is the proper will language that needs to be included in their last will and testament. And so usually that, and if you Google sample will writing language, you'll find a lot of them. And what you want to do is make sure that you give them several options, whether it's for a residual gift, for universal gift, or for a specific gift. Meaning a residual is basically a percentage of the residue of the estate. A universal is where they basically designate 100% of their estate to your charity, or a pecuniary or also a specific gift is a specific dollar amount. The second part of the will writing, the will language, is the organization's information. So the proper corporate name of the organization, the address, and sometimes it's like your charitable number, etc. So you want to make sure that they have the right spelling and the right address, etc. Because in my experience, the number one reason why sometimes wills are contested is not necessarily because of family members, but sometimes it's because of, or at least it makes settling the estate slow down, is because it's unclear which charity it is, especially if there's like several charities with names that are somewhat similar or in the same cause, so that can create confusion, and so that's what you want to provide. Oh, Janet says, I was asking about finding new legacy prospects through a brochure or mailing. So you want to be, okay, I understand. Sorry, so I didn't catch that. Sorry about that, Janet. So you can find, you can definitely, the thing is you're not necessarily going to find new legacy prospects, but you will nudge donors to start thinking about that and move them to notify you and to let you know that they're thinking about it. So what you do want to do is, like, for instance, your legacy webpage, you want to be able to capture donors' contact information so you can follow up with them. What I mean by that is, if you have your legacy page and you provide, a brochure, or you provide sample language, or you provide like this will writing workbook, or whatever tool that you provide with them that they can download, you want to make sure that you ask them to provide at least an email or a phone number, but at least an email, at a minimum, so that you can then follow up with them to see where they are in that process. Through your brochures or mailings, you want to be constantly nudging them. So, either putting in your appeals, a PS, or a buck slip where they can notify you, where they can contact you to receive more information. So you can definitely do that, and that's low-hanging fruit tactics that you should be doing anyway.
Excuse me, Ligia?
Yes.
We have time for just one more question. Okay.
Okay. So let me just see what Okay. So Janet asks about good organization brochures and says that she's working with Free Will. So that's great. Free Will, honestly, I do know a Free Will. I've never worked with them. A lot of these online will writing tools are relatively new, so I can't speak to them. But in terms of finding good legacy marketing materials, I do have a few, but I don't have their authorization to share them. So I would have to, if you want me to send you some of them, I would have to get their okay to share their brochures with you. But honestly, it really comes down to you looking at who are in your market, who are the leaders in legacy marketing, and then being critically analyze their brochures to see what are they doing well, what are they doing not so well, are they applying any of these things that I just shared with you during this webinar, and how can you develop your own brochures in a way that is true to you without copying what others are doing, because oftentimes there is still a lot of not so great marketing materials out there. Not all of them are bad. I'm just saying there's still room for a lot of improvement. So you want to make sure that you're not repeating someone else's mistake. And so that's why I'm very big about, use inspiration from others, but don't redo the same thing that others are doing, because then that's why there's a lack of creativity in legacy marketing. So if I haven't gone to your question, or if you have any other questions that come to you after we get off this webinar, please don't hesitate to email me at ligia@globetrottingfundraiser.com. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions after offline, because I see that we're over 10 minutes or so. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. I hope this was useful, and I think there should probably be a satisfaction survey, so I hope you will take the time to complete the survey and provide me with some feedback, because it helps me improve these in my webinars and adapt based on your needs. So thank you so much, and I wish you a lot of luck with your legacy marketing.
All right. Thank you, Ligia, for a great presentation. Also, thanks to you, our audience, for attending today's webinar. Please take a brief moment to complete our survey, which helps us program future events. Upon completion of the survey, you will be able to download and print your certificate for CFRE Continuing Education Credit. Be sure to join us for our next webinar, Advancing Your Career in a Post-Pandemic World. That'll take place April 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern. For a complete list of upcoming webinars, please visit www.afpglobal.org/webinars. This concludes today's program. Again, thank you. Stay well and have a great rest of your day.